Hey everyone, Edward Cohen here. On today's episode of Tangent PropTech, I'm going to introduce you to a new show from our friends at In the Loop, a new podcast from LoopNet, the online marketplace for commercial real estate listings and marketing solutions. It's an episode that I particularly enjoyed because the themes they discuss echo a lot of the conversations we have here on this podcast. Jordan and Phil get into topics such as what sustainability means for office spaces and the concept of resiliency and its impact on the built environment. Topics that are shaping not just architecture and construction, but also technology and the entire real estate ecosystem. If you care about how design, innovation, AI, and sustainability are transforming how we build and experience space, this one's for you. Let's get into it. I'll be back when In the Loop wraps to close us out.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Loop, the podcast series from LoopNet, where we explore the stories, ideas, and people behind the world of commercial real estate. Well, I'm here today on the roof of CoStar Group's headquarters in sunny Roslyn, Virginia, and I'm excited to meet with Jordan Goldstein, co-CEO of Gensler, an international design and architecture firm celebrated for their cutting-edge work at the forefront of design, innovation, and sustainability. We're going to talk today about what sustainability means for the office environment and the concept of resiliency and how it impacts on the built environment generally and on the workplace. So let's head inside, meet with Jordan now, and get started. Jordan, welcome to In the Loop. It's great to have you here. Jordan Goldstein from Gensler, which is an internationally renowned architecture and design firm in commercial real estate. Is that fair to say?
Sure. Well, first of all, great to be here. Thank you for having me. But yes, we really kind of everything from the commercial real estate side of the world to looking at lifestyle, community and civic projects, as well as health projects as well.
And the focus of today's episode is particularly on sustainability and green initiatives or green issues within the space. I thought we could start by maybe talking a little bit about how you see the kind of state of play as it pertains to those issues in commercial real estate, in particular in the office sector today. Tell me a little bit about how you see that.
Yeah, it's very interesting to look at the real estate landscape, from the perspective of sustainability. So for us, as a global firm, we are operating and we're doing work in 140 different countries. So we're able to get this amazing perspective worldwide, but at the same time, also to be really hyper-local, in the communities that we're working in. So then we're seeing it very much from the perspective of what does it mean to be looking at real estate development and creating, powerful experiences in particular markets. So when we talk about sustainability, we really look at it as the intersection of a couple different areas, certainly planet, people, and also then looking at it from kind of the economics, the financial side of real estate. So weaving those all together and looking at sustainability and resilience through that lens.
What do you see as the drivers of change or the trends over the last few years, 10 years in the sector? What's changed, what's shifted in the industry and in this area?
Yeah, there's quite a few drivers, but one that comes to mind when we're talking about it is you hear that term often in real estate, flight to quality. But I think it means something different now. It's a flight to buildings, places, and spaces that people want to be in, not just because it's a great building, a great piece of architecture, a great environment. But because it is also contributing positively to the betterment of the environment, also that there's something more than just a place to do work, that there's an opportunity to plug in from a larger lifestyle standpoint. That notion of being able to be in an office environment and then being able to walk outside being able to have an outdoor, experience, restaurants, be able to have retail, opportunities for residential near that as well. So the equations have changed. At the same time, I think it's created a tremendous opportunity to just think differently about what makes good places and spaces today.
And so when you think about that change and I suppose there's a shifting palette of considerations that go into a commercial building, an office, a space or a place. How could you kind of quantify the shift in terms of the consideration for things like sustainability and green issues since the start of your career to now? Like how much has that changed?
Well, for me, I got into this industry 30 years ago, and the conversation we're having now wasn't really happening then. So to be able to have this conversation together, but also in a way that it resonates in the larger marketplace, and it's really part of kind of the mainstream dialogue, it is fantastic. It's just phenomenal that there is this kind of shift in awareness. I look at it for us as a real opportunity, we're doing over 1.6 billion square feet of project work every year.
Incredible.
Which is amazing to think about that opportunity, that footprint, and being able to look at the work that we're doing with the clients we're working with the people that we are impacting as a chance to make a statement, about how the design world can really positively affect human experience.
I'd love to hear more about your view on technological change today and how it's influencing the industry.
Well, AI is certainly, top of mind.
Sure.
And it's certainly, you see it all over the place. We're taking at Gensler a very proactive approach to it. So where a lot of the industry feels like they're reticent and kind of sitting back, we actually leaned in several years ago when we realized, there's going to be a change to the way, buildings are planned, the way real estate is managed, the way people are able to experience space. So let's kind of lean into that. So we started developing our own technologies that allowed us to draw, imagine, create, ideate, create optionality very early, like very upstream in the design process. So you and I could be sitting and talking about a new project, whether it's an office or mixed use or a hotel, or a stadium or an airport, and start to really craft those experience almost instantaneously.
Incredible.
That we're able to be in spaces and really change, as we're talking. Well, maybe it's like this. Wow, what if it's like that? And the more recent one for us is to overlay kind of a cinematic experience to that. So imagine that, rather than trying to think through what would a day in the life be of an employee walking into a new workspace, a new headquarters day one, now we can actually really put that together in a true storyline where there's that arc of the narrative where you can feel what it would be like walking into that new building, walking through the office, running into people, and develop that, from a cinematic standpoint. And so there's that emotive side of it, which we, I think the beauty of design is it's inherently an optimistic act. So being able to bring that forward so we can, before, dollars are fully invested, before the nails and the shovels are flying around, you get a feel for it.
Yeah. And that storytelling component of the design process, it must change the relationship with your client, right? It must enable you to have a much more productive, kind of open, constructive dialogue.
It makes it very collaborative.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's nice about it. I think for us, around the globe in our 57 offices, we really look at design as, it's not a solo act. It's really the voices of many. So now with these additional tools in the toolbox sitting around the table, and being able to, craft ideas and optionality and ideate together, it just changes the game.
And speaking of changing the game, I mean, this shift that you're talking about, an architecture firm, a design firm, becoming more of a technology company. You were talking there about making investments in your own in-house technology. That's a major change for the business.
Yeah.
How does that connect to issues around sustainability, around green initiatives, around sustainability compliance? So how does technology influence that side of the business?
Well, there's two areas that really come to mind, when you ask that. One is everything I just mentioned about imagining that experience. We have an overlay from a technology standpoint that as we're ideating together, we can actually look at the full carbon footprint of what that would be.
Wow.
So if we're all of a sudden saying that's a great experience, but it's feeling like it's too much of an impact, how do we dial that back? We could do that and be able to kind of adjust the dials, change that experience, and also change the true impact to the built environment. So that's one area. The other is a couple of years ago, we started Gensler product sustainability standards. And what we have now done is it's affected, over 1,400 products that are out there, in the industry, is being able to really set a minimum threshold from a sustainable footprint standpoint for products that are acceptable to be considered for products. For places and buildings. So whether it's, the interior of a space like we're in now, or building a new building and it's the exterior, and we're looking at, the sum total of, materials that are going into that, what is that footprint? And how do we look at, we're kind of shopping from categories that have really been looked at and set forward as minimum threshold. And then with each of those, here's the minimum that kind of be considered, that's the right level of impact, but then also what's the reach, for each of those product categories. And so we've set that out there in a way that it's not really meant to be proprietary. It's meant to be kind of open source for the industry to utilize and for manufacturers to really queue off of. So what we're finding is it's really influenced manufacturers thinking about what materials are they putting into the libraries of architecture and design firms around the world.
And so you talk about the kind of sum total carbon impact of a building and those considerations, those categories as you call them. To a layperson, could you talk a little bit more about those categories? What are some of the categories that go into the carbon impact of a building?
Sure, yeah, it's amazing to think about that. The built environment is really 40% kind of the carbon footprint that's out there. 11% of that is really that's embodied carbon. That's the materials, the finishes, the systems and structure that are making up the buildings. So if we think about it, there's kind of these, quiet impactors. Those are, you think about whether it's the carpet, the drywall, the framing that's going into, a building, the materials that are creating kind of that, environment itself, that we're in. That's a significant impact. So with the churn that often happens in the real estate world, to think about, well, what's the circularity of these materials? What's the life cycle? What's the ability for them to, in a sense, go back from a recycling standpoint, whether that's being recomposited to something else or, it's being reutilized in a different way. It sets up a dialogue that I think is very different than going back, like I was saying earlier, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
And what about the materials of the construction of the building itself?
Yeah.
I was reading recently about a landmark project in London using mass timber.
Yes.
Which feels like a significant moment, or at least a very interesting story. It's kind of indicative of some change. Tell me about that, the kind of concrete, timber, bricks and mortar side of this.
Yeah, that's what's so exciting about this moment now in the industry, is that there is this rethinking of the structural systems, kind of the exoskeleton of a building. So whether that's the structural components that hold up a building, mass timber is one that we've been looking at and working with now for many years, and it's actually phenomenal. If you think about that for a second, if you build a building out of mass timber, you're getting the kind of the inherent strength of wood members that are kind of laminated together. it looks fantastic, right? So you don't have to sit there and clad over underneath and say, you know what, we need to cover the guts because the guts aren't looking good.
Yeah, you actually just want to see it.
You just want to see it.
Yeah.
So whether that's the project you mentioned in UK, we did a project, not far from where we're sitting now for Under Armour, which is their world headquarters. That's all mass timber building. It is, not only is it a great storyline from a carbon footprint standpoint, but it's a great experience, from a user standpoint.
And that's really the ideal intersection, right?
Ideal intersection, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then even on the concrete side, they're looking at different types, different mixes of components in the concrete kind of composition that allows for a lower carbon footprint. You've heard things like fly ash concrete. That's one example, but that's a big change as well. So, concrete itself now has a pull-down menu of options, and similar with steel.
Yeah. What are the barriers to entry, given that these seem like great solutions or great options for the future? What are the barriers to entry, or that stop every building from being made out of mass timber or more sustainable concrete?
It's a great question. One of the barriers to entry is certainly around cost. And there's so much fluctuation in cost these days that being able to kind of blue sky it from the beginning and say, you know what, let's consider multiple options and not be deterred by cost early on, because what we've seen even in the last 12 months is the fluctuations where 12 months ago one of those systems may have been prohibitively more expensive. But now, given the changes in the market, it's a little bit more evened out. So being able to consider and have agility in the design process is, I think, a really smart way to go.
And do you find nowadays that your clients are more open to some of these alternatives? Is that changing over time?
Yeah, it definitely is changing. And it seems like it's not just the clients, which would be like the tenants, that would be occupying, for instance, an office building. So being more open to, sustainability that you can really see and feel, both in the materials and a biophilic strategy. Also understanding, like we were talking about mass timber. Well, fantastic look at, but it also serves a great purpose. But also on the developer side, the building ownership side, of being able to, look at the investment strategy and say, okay, what's the return on investment, given the cost outlay at the beginning. But then at the same time, what's the operational side of this? To maintain and operate that building, if it may mean that the upfront cost could be ticking a little higher, but the long-term operating cost and life cycle is a different equation, maybe that's worth looking at.
Yeah, it becomes more appealing at that point.
Yeah.
It feels timely that we're coming to this conversation now, because again, I was doing some kind of background reading, and the LEED version 5 guidelines recently were released. So can you tell me a little bit about that? Tell me about the implications of that update, what it means for you, for your clients, and for the industry as a whole.
Well, what LEED did when it first came out was it really kind of set a high bar and caused a lot of, whether it's on the tenant side, on the ownership side, development side, to think about, well, reaching that mark or reaching the different levels that were set offers a different product in the marketplace. That product is going to be looked at differently. It's going to be evaluated differently. And, it translated to that flight to quality that I mentioned early on. So as materials have changed, as systems have changed, as the appreciation of what does it mean to be, building with a resilient mindset has shifted, being able to change those levels has been really important. So what we find is that adjusting that, gravitating it kind of higher, it also kind of lifts all boats, in the water, and it creates a different dialogue out there, which I think is a welcome one.
Absolutely. Gensler is a global firm, and you mentioned that you have offices in 50 some countries around the world. Tell me about what's going on around the world in this area. What are the learnings? What are the insights? How are things different, the same? Like, tell me more about what's going on out there in the wide world of real estate.
I mean, that is the phenomenal thing about the firm that we have, is that there are it really is a 24/7, 365 day a year experience. So with the 57 offices working in 140 different countries, you're just seeing this amazing array of project work happening. What I'm finding in the EU and the UK is there's some amazing reposition projects. So it's like, how can you bring new life to old bones?
Right.
And they may have been an aging building or a series of buildings that were kind of people walking around almost like an island. That through the redevelopment can create a whole level of energy and bring new spaces to the market, and whether that's retail level spaces at the ground level experience, or creating things above that are, it was vacant or was underperforming, and that reposition happens quicker than a new build. So it's being able to be a catalyst faster in that marketplace.
So if we take an example like that, where I suppose you have two options when you take an existing asset. You could start again, or you could work with what's already there. So tell me about the advantages of working with what's already there, and why that should be a serious consideration for a developer, for a tenant, for a town council. For everyone involved in the planning.
It is a great sustainable story from day one, because you're not taking the building down. So there's a reposition opportunity where you're, in a sense, using that existing structure or other components in addition to the structure that you may have to augment it, but you're actually starting with a canvas that already has some paint on it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the interesting thing is, from an architecture and design standpoint, it's a really interesting constraint. It adds a kind of a richness.
Yeah.
And an ingredient that you're already working with something there. And we're seeing more and more jurisdictions around the world look with a more friendly eye towards repositions and say, you know what, we rather see more of those, and maybe even incentivize that development opportunity, versus the new build. One, because it'll bring things to market faster. Two, because it also helps from a community dialogue standpoint. And three, because it's also able to, start to tie in that resilience narrative, in a way that really, is seen and felt.
And that's a real win-win, right? When the economics are better, and when the resiliency, the sustainability of the project are better. I think also with these repositioning or repurposing, they can lead to some very innovative results. I think about London particularly. Obviously, I've got some skin in the game, advocating for the UK, but there are some really interesting projects from the last 20 years in London where existing buildings have been repurposed or added to, augmented in some way, and it leads to interesting spaces and beautiful design.
Yeah, and I'll go across the channel there to Paris, and there's a huge opportunity there. Like, we're doing one project, it's 450,000 square feet, which is a reposition for a building that's on the Seine, and it's a full reposition, immediately leased up. One tenant's taking the entire thing. It is a fantastic sustainability story, because it is such a big building. But it's also a chance to really demonstrate to the marketplace that, you can do this at scale. And you can use these old bones. You can add to it. You can bring kind of a relevance to today into a building from yesteryear. But you can do that it also is really a strong platform for tomorrow as well. So it's not just building for today. You're thinking about, how do you take these, the ingredients that are there and really set up a recipe that can serve for years to come. And, for that building like that, which, by the way, had no useful rooftop to actually create, because of its position relative to the river, to the city, it becomes an amazing opportunity to take advantage of that. So it's not just, saying, well, the building was this way, so therefore we have to use it that way and maybe just reclad it. It's just reimagining the entire thing.
I've noticed you use the term resiliency.
Yes.
Tell me about what resiliency means to you and what resiliency means to Gensler.
It means that it goes beyond just looking at sustainability through the ways that I think so many people touch that word and understand that word. Resilience is thinking about it not just from how things are built, how things are strategized and developed, but also how we live with it, how we experience it, and really how are we using the power of design to really shape human experiences. So I think resiliency looks at it that way, but it also goes beyond the here and now. Resiliency is also about how do you create something that can endure. We have this exhibit that we were invited to be a part of the Time, Space, and Existence exhibit at the Venice Biennale. And so it's exhibiting right now. And we thought, okay, well, let's take resilience into the equation. And what would the thesis be, for an exhibit? And we said, what if we weren't building for decades, but instead we were building for centuries? What would it look like? What could it be like? And so that's the exhibit. And I think when we think about, for us, resilience, that's one way to consider it.
Jordan, tell me about electrifying buildings. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it sounds very strange, but it actually is a great way to think about the topic. We were talking about sustainability and resilience. And I'll use a specific example. I'll use us. So we needed to move our San Francisco office. And Gensler as a firm was founded in 1965 in San Francisco. So this was particularly meaningful for us.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at it, we're like, wow, the building we were in was a fossil fuel powered building, meaning that all the energy that we were utilizing for our conditioning, for kind of our life in the building was coming off of fossil fuel. So we said, well, what if we look for an electrified building, meaning all that energy was coming through the electrical grid rather than fossil fuel. And we found a building. And the interesting story to some of the themes we've been talking about is the building, the main part, the floor we were looking to take was an old trading floor, an older building that a new building had been attached to. So we could actually have a reposition story for our own office in an electrified building. So the energy footprint is much better. The carbon associated with that is much lower. And then for us, all the materials that we utilized to really build our own space, we used a ton of salvage material. So the flooring, the metals, some of the framing, all that stuff is salvaged. And then the workspace, because it's a mixture of kind of old and new, raw and refined, is phenomenal. It just feels good to be in that environment. So it was a great move for us, certainly better from an economic standpoint. And then from a living your mission.
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's
living
a
our
kind
mission.
of living case study of the Gensler approach. So
very much so.
Yeah, that must be wonderful. You mentioned the firm was founded in 1965.
So it's 60 years old.
Incredible. So how do you think about legacy and your own kind of personal impact on a business like that? Thinking about what you've inherited and the future of the business. Tell me about how you see that.
Well, 60 years. It was founded by Art Gensler and, really started in the design world from a total different point of view, which was, yes, we could create buildings, but what about the spaces that people are literally in every day? So really the whole thoughtfulness around interior design and architecture merging together, inside out thinking started back then. So Art led the firm for a number of years. My immediate predecessors that were really for me and my business partner, our mentors, they led the firm for nearly 20 years. So myself and Elizabeth Brink, who's based out of Los Angeles, have been leading the firm for the last year and a half as co-CEOs. So when you think about that, that's only really 3 generations in 60 years, which is kind of unheard of in large companies. So we're honored to be in this role, but at the same time, we look at it from a legacy standpoint. How do we make sure that we can pass the batons to the next generation and the next generation? So everything we've been talking about is really top of mind for those, young people coming out of school, making that jump from academia, to the profession. And the way we've set it up is, the old model of apprenticeship, of come in and, go draw bathrooms and maybe doors, and you can graduate to stairs.
Yeah.
That's how I came into the industry.
Amazing.
You can't do that anymore, especially with the skills that students are coming out of schools with now. I mean, they're, digital natives to the nth degree. Their ability to converse, in a digital platform, interfaces move from one to another. That fluidity and also the familiarity from an AI standpoint, that's refreshing. So coming into, our environment day one in our locations around the world, Elizabeth and I really encouraging our teams to, all voices resonate. Everyone's hands can be shaping that clay. And that's important because at that point, you're then really giving the next generation a ton of empowerment. You're giving a chance for them to figure out their swim lanes and what works for them. When I look at my career over 30 years, it's not been a linear path. It's been a very kind of curvilinear road. And there were off ramps and there were opportunities to take door number one or door number two and not take a prescribed path. And I feel like the next generation should have that opportunity as well, probably even more so than what I experienced.
It's interesting to hear the parallels between your own career when it began and what you see as the strengths of the next generation. When you entered the workforce, you brought a new set of skills to the table, and you learned skills from the prior generation, but you also brought something new. And it sounds like you see that happening again and again, which is really exciting. What do you think are some of the unique skills and traits of this next generation, and what excites you about that they're bringing to the table?
Well, one thing I'm really excited about is there's more of an awareness now for people coming in of the brand of you. What is their individual brand? I mean, for many of them, they have a social media platform that represents them. Some of them come in and they've already tried their hand in businesses. Maybe they're smaller scale, but they've actually started to play with what their voice is in the world. That's phenomenal. So rather than just say, okay, that was then, this is now, our approach is, bring that to the table. Let the brand of you help inform the brand of us. And that collective can hopefully put a different message out there in the world.
If we keep thinking about the future for a few more moments, when you look ahead, what policy changes or industry changes do you think are critical to continue the good work that's being done in sustainability and resiliency, or to accelerate it or improve upon it?
It would be great to see more incentivization of reposition projects in communities, very local. So how can, governments at a local level really look to say, let's think differently about how we incentivize these projects, how projects are financed. Maybe there can be a different equation where there's a greater public involvement or different levels of relief or tax policies that are different that allow these developments to happen. Because right now what we see is some great opportunities for this level of dialogue, but often there's a reticence around, it's not really penciling out. So let's just table that and check in again in 6 months or a year. So what are ways to really kind of, prime the pump on that? I think the other kind of the flip side of that, just the amazing experimentation that's happening in materials now. And some of these are in certainly mainstream companies, but others are in these smaller companies that are just getting their footing. They've developed some great new technology. They want to get it out there. They don't necessarily have the resources. So, how do we as designers create opportunity, create avenues for these products to be, hit the marketplace, and our projects, opportunities to be, greater testing grounds, for innovation, not just in the types of overall buildings, but also in the things that make them.
I've been asking every guest that I've been speaking to on this podcast 3 kind of quick fire questions.
Ooh, okay, it's the rapid fire session.
Yeah, just to kind of get to know you a little bit better. So before we wrap up, I'd love to ask you those 3 questions.
Go for it.
So the first question is, what's your favorite city or built place in the world?
Well, there's so many places. I get the good fortune to travel just about every week to some location around the world, which is phenomenal. But there's 2 places that are kind of near and dear. One is Tokyo, and the other is Rome, because they're 2 places that I had a chance to study at while I was in school. And in both cases, the streets, the public squares, those were the classrooms. When I was in those places, living in both places, I did not go into a classroom. The classes were the streets. And when you see how people are using those streets every day, it made me realize that, a job as an architect isn't just create a building. It's really how are you additive to society? How are you bettering the world? And how are you doing something that can plug in to the way people live their lives and better it by virtue of what you're adding?
So question 2, which I feel you've answered somewhat already, is what is it about those places that appeals to you so much, or that you find special or unique?
Energy. That there's just energy around the clock, and that you can feel it. And it may be different city to city. And certainly it's, what is local there that makes it, so much like Rome or so much like Tokyo. And being able to appreciate what's different between those places as well, and just celebrating that energy. So I feel like for our projects that we're doing, let's be able to add to that energy. Or if there isn't already energy there, that what we're doing in that location brings it.
And the final question, and this is perhaps the most challenging one, given that these are places
for 500
that
points. This is the win. This is it.
The jackpot is, what would you do, if anything, to improve those places?
Well, that's a good one. I definitely feel like when we do our work, it isn't do it, be done, and walk away. I think a big piece for us, and Art Gensler started this with the company, was clients first. Stay with them and recognize that the journey doesn't end when a space or a place is finished. So what we've seen is we have over 90% repeat business, and that's because we stay with the clients, and we really want to understand, okay, well, how is that working? How is that space, or that building, or that stadium, or that airport, how's it going? And what do we need to adjust over time? And what do we learn from it? And with the technology overlay, it's not just what we hear, also data being able to inform what we are able to learn from those buildings.
So by way of some final thoughts, you said something earlier which I thought was great, that design is an act of optimism.
Yes.
So tell me about how optimistic you're feeling about the future of resiliency, sustainability in the office sector and the built environment generally.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, design is inherently an optimistic act. And when I got into architecture and design, and when I came to Gensler, I felt I was surrounded by people that felt the same. And we look at it as, what we're doing, is an opportunity to bring that power of design to really positively impact. And that, resilience and sustainable narrative that we've been talking about, here is part of it. It's not a trend. It's really like a must, and it's just happening. And I think the beauty of it is it's weaving itself into kind of the fabric of everything we do every day now. Those new materials, those different ways of exploring through technology the impact, those manufacturers that are trying things differently based on the dialogue they're having with the industry, developers, clients, workplace tenants, fan experience, passenger experiences, all informing it. It leads to a different equation now where everything we just talked about is starting to bake itself in.
Well, it feels like a great point to leave it on. I could honestly talk about this and talk with you all day. I so appreciate your time and you sharing your insights and your experience with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. What a great dialogue.
So thank you again to Jordan Goldstein, co-CEO of Gensler. I do so appreciate you joining us. It's been a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.
Well, thanks for having me. What a great dialogue, and I really appreciate the ability just to talk about not only what we do, but how we're experiencing it. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you again for joining us today on In the Loop, the podcast series from LoopNet, where we explore the stories and the ideas and also the people behind the commercial real estate industry. Do join us next time for another episode. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of In the Loop from LoopNet. I love discovering new podcasts in the real estate world that add to my understanding of this vast ecosystem, and I hope you liked it as well. What did you take away from this conversation between Phil and Jordan about how the architectural side of the industry is rethinking the built world? I think it's a great reminder that PropTech innovation doesn't happen in isolation, that it's part of a much bigger movement towards smarter, more sustainable buildings and cities. Big thanks to LoopNet and the In the Loop podcast team for orchestrating this collaboration. We'll be back soon with more stories and insights from the world of tangent PropTech, exploring where real estate meets technology and innovation. Until next time, I'm Edward Cohen. Thanks for listening.